What's good, YouTube? It's Rico here, and I got a deck profile for Pendulum Magician. This deck refuses to die. um, so I'm kind of at this point in the format where, even though the format's like a couple weeks old, it's more or less a continuation of the previous format, and I'm kind of just bored of things right now. Like, as much as I appreciate control, like Sky Striker and like even like Altergeist and True Draco, as much as I appreciate that playstyle, I'm really not good at it. I'm definitely more of an aggressive player, and I feel like the only like aggressive combo deck right now is Goki, and I really hate how that deck's game plan is either you're gonna extra link them or you're gonna hand loop them, and there's like really not much else to it. So I decided to just mess around with Pendulum Magician again. Like, I was between a bunch of like a handful of fun decks that I wanted to mess around with, and I decided to play Pendulum Magician because I feel like this deck really hasn't been hit to the point where it's unplayable. Like, it's definitely not like absurdly broken anymore. But none of the consistency was really harmed. It's really more of just the power was hurt. And I think that it still does. I feel like it can still do well in the meta. And I know, like, I think it was Mexico City where it got top 8 at like the YCS 200. And then like it still makes sporadic tops here and here there. So even with like Astrograph gone and like Electromite at 1 and everything, this deck is still definitely very viable. And I took this to a locals on yesterday on Sunday, and there were none of like the Sky Striker players were there that day. Like my two friends who play Sky Striker weren't there, and then I'm the other Sky Striker player, and I wasn't playing Sky Striker. So, but like I played like a bunch of like, I guess, quote unquote pseudo meta decks, and that like they weren't like top tier, but they were things that you could run into at a regional or a YCS and be threatened by them. So things like Cyber Dragon, Mech Knight Invoked, Burning Abyss. There was one Goki player, but we did 6 rounds total. It was 2 separate 3-round tournaments, and I went completely undefeated through all of it. I played against Cyber Dragon twice, same person. I played against Burning Abyss, who was a friend of mine, and I played against Mech Knight Invoked, and then I played against Goki. I actually played against 2 Mech Knight Invokes, so I don't know how this does against like Sky Striker or Altergeist or anything. But I feel like in theory it should do fine. Same with like True Draco, it should be okay. Goki is a coin toss, but every matchup with Goki is a coin toss. It's do they open broken or not, and do you open broken or not, essentially. So yeah, let's just get into it. This is probably really unorthodox compared to some other Magician decks. I chose to focus on the Magicians more than anything else, which you'll see in my choices. So yeah, so first months, the Magicians are 3 Black Fang. It's really just like a lot of the obvious Magicians. 3 Harmonizing. I firmly believe this is like one of the primary reasons this deck is still amazing. Just because like being able to, it's a free synchro summon or Xyz summon or link summon or whatever you need for it. Just pulling it out of your deck. This is definitely one of the reasons this deck is still so crazy. And like it shows, like it's at 1 in the OCG, and that deck barely ever pops up anymore. 2 Oath Dragon. I was considering 3 for a while because I think this card is a major key card in maintaining your advantage, because this and Wisdom Eye and Harmonizing, you just constantly loop Pendulum cards back to your hand, and generally it means you like almost never run out of resources. But it's definitely not a card you want to see multiples of, and you don't want to necessarily open it because it's a level 6, so you can't like normal summon it, and Pendulum summoning it doesn't really get you a lot. I don't play Norito or any of the rank 6s just because there's no space in the extra deck, because like every other card I'm playing I would rather play over Norito. And really I don't play, I play like 5 level 6s, but I don't feel like that's enough to justify wanting it. Like I have missed Norito a couple times, but so far I haven't found myself needing it. But generally, like 2 Elf Dragons mainly just so it doesn't get banished off of Desires, or if one gets popped you can use the second one, but you don't want to see it in multiples, and you'd rather search it than hard draw it usually. So I think 2 is fine. 3 Purple Poison. I've seen some builds drop this to 2, and I think the guy who got second place at NAS this year was playing 1 of this and 1 of Blackfang. I think that's absolutely asinine. Aside from being a low scale, this card is just like the reason you can just like out most floodgates. It's just you ram this into something and pop a floodgate and go off. And like that's what I did at the regionals when this deck still had Astrograph. Is like I'd run into like Rivalry or Anti-Spell or like Monitor Up, and I just ram Purple Poison into something and pop it. And like I know that was 2 formats ago now, but I feel like this deck's overall game plan hasn't changed. Like it still plays the same way. And then 3 Wisdom Eye. This is also another one of the reasons this deck is still like viable and good. Is just like this. Changing your scales into whatever you need it to be, and then putting a level 4 in your extra deck is just really nice. 1 Zonkai Magician. This is just because it's level 7. It's the strongest level 7 Magician, I believe. And like the light negation effect is marginally useful at times. But mainly it's a level 7 you summon off of Harmonizing for Vortex Dragon. But yeah. And then Time Gazer and the 3 Chronograph, just because Electromite. And then also for Electromite plays and other plays in general, I play the 3 Dark Worm and 2 Gate Zero. So when I was first, the last time I did a Pendulum Magician deck profile was like shortly after the ban list that banned Astrograph Sorcerer, and in that one I had cut Dark Worm to 2 and Gate Zero to 1, just because I felt like it wasn't something you wanted to see. The Gate Zero wasn't something you wanted to see more than once, and Dark Worm was not the best thing anymore, just the way I was playing it, where I wanted to focus like even more on the Magicians. But looking back at it now, the triple Dark Worm and 2 Gate Zero is still really good, because the Gate Zeros are still level 7s you can use for Vortex in a situation where like you can't get to Zonkai or whatever if you just end up having both Gate Zeros. Dark Worm's just a really good starter, especially with Chronograph Sorcerer. There's no real good normal summons in the deck. Like, the only really good normal summons besides Dark Worm are a Magician if it's backed up by a Dark Worm or a Time Gazer Magician. So, generally, it's not really hurting to play the 3 Dark Worm, because you're not really going to normal summon anything else. And also, Dark Worm and Pendulum Call is still an absolutely insane play. So, playing 3 Dark Worm maxes out the chances of you opening that. And yeah, I do tend to side one of each of them out, though, if I need the space, and it doesn't really hurt to do. So, yeah. And the last monster I'm playing, this is a flex spot right now. I'm messing around with a bunch of stuff. I was playing Abyss Actor Curtain Raiser just because it's a free special summon, and I might go back to it, but I'm also trying out Dragon Pit Magician right now, just because there's a lot of back row running around, so, excuse me. With all the back row running around, so like you got Sky Striker, you got Altergeist, you got True Draco, and you got all that stuff. Just having a searchable MST that's a scale 8 that you're essentially running 4 because of Wisdom Eye Magician. But you can just search it and pop something if there's something threatening you, or if there's like a lone back row and you want to make sure your play goes through. And it being level 7 means it does cute things into Absolute Dragon. As an option, but generally it's there for the spot removal. I didn't get conclusive results when I tried it on Sunday, because if you paid attention to the decks I mentioned, that was Burning Abyss, Mech Knight Invoked, Goki, and Cyber Dragon. I was quite literally the deck playing the most back row, and I was playing 2 traps. So, yeah. I think it's good in theory. I'm going to try it on Wednesday. And my friends that play Sky Striker are probably going to be there, so we'll see how it does in that situation. So that was all the monsters. I don't play the mythical beasts. I honestly think they kind of suck. Jackal King is good, because like just monster negation in general is always really good. But I think Master Cerberus is like really, really risky card to play, because like if it resolves, it's great because you get Jackal King and you also get something to summon Electromite with. But if it gets ashed, like, or negated in any way where it gets stuck in your Pendulum Zone, if you don't have a way to make Electromite and clear it, your turn basically just ends. And this is always the problem I've had with the Mythical Beasts, is that, like, they raise the deck's power, but they also make the deck brickier. And that's a real problem I have with it. And that's why when I played this at Regional back in March, I believe, I chose not to play the Mythical Beasts, and I played Wisdom Eye Magician and Oath Dragon Magician instead. Just because, like, despite the ceiling that the Jackal King gives you, it's really just, like, too risky for me. I'd rather the deck be consistent. And so far, this deck's been really consistent for me. I guess you could make an argument for Jackal King by itself without the Master Cerberus, but at that point, Jackal King's not a combo piece, so it turns into a brick. And I think the two biggest advantages of the Magician are that no card in the deck is really a serious brick, like Time Gazer kind of is, but if you draw it, it's still not the end of the world. And then like it's not really that susceptible to Ash. Like there are power cards that hurt when they get hit by Ash, but generally you can play through it anyway. And I feel like Master Cerberus and Jackal can kind of play through that. And like if I really wanted to play Jackal King by itself, at that point I might as well just play Apex Avian, because Jackal King being scale 4 means I can't Pendulum with it anyway. So, and I don't think I would play Apex Avian either. As cool as it is in theory, that card is a massive fucking brick. And then I don't main hand traps just because I feel like Pendulum as a deck, like the Pendulum mechanic in general, generally doesn't play well with hand traps, if you ask me. You generally want to do stuff that is furthering your game state or increasing your own advantage, and hand traps are either -1s or they break even, and they're disruption cards as opposed to cards that further your own game. So I feel like because everything in Pendulum is a 2-card combo, because that's how the Pendulum mechanic works, you want to do things that further your own game, and every hand trap in your hand could instead be a card that would further your own game. So I don't main them for that reason, and this was a philosophy I had running into going into the regional at the time, but that was also because during that format there was no hand trap that was good against every single deck. But I feel like the theory still stands for the reason that you'd rather just play cards that push your own game. And right now in this format, I feel like the only deck where you're truly going to die if you don't have a hand trap is Goki. At which point, if I run into Goki and I lose a die roll and they go off, I'm just going to accept the game 1 loss, and then I side like 6 to 9 hand traps. And just hope for the best, really. That's really all you can do against Goki. I'm really mad that deck is still a thing. I'm really mad Firewall's still a thing, actually. But yeah. So yeah, but I do side hand traps. But that's on the monsters. For spells, I go hard on the Duelist Alliance engine. Like, I play 3 Duelist Alliance, 3 Pendulum Call, 2 Star Pendulum Graph, and 2 Time Pendulum Graph. I firmly believe that these are the reason this deck is still insane. Like, I saw a post on Pojo where someone was saying it really sucks that this deck doesn't really have an incentive to play Duelist Alliance. And I was like, are you high? These cards are insane. Like, this Star Pendulum Graph is amazing because this is how you maintain advantage, because every time a Magician leaves your field, like once per turn, you add another Magician to your hand, so you just don't lose advantage if that card stays up. And also just the blanket protection from spell effects for your spellcasters seems like it'd be pretty nice against Sky Striker. Time Pendulum Graph is pretty great just because you always have access to Time Star Magician on hand. So like this backed by Time Star, this backed by Pendulum Call, is just a huge swing in momentum if it resolves, just because you just get 2 cards from your opponent for free. And then like Pendulum Call, I feel like without Joker and without like the other like mainly without Joker, honestly, like I guess like losing Astrograph sucked too, but like without Joker, sometimes you just have hands where you need to grab 2 pendulums from your deck, and you just do this and you go off. And like I said, this plus Darkworm is like incredibly powerful because you don't lose any advantage from the Pendulum Call, and then you just plus off a Darkworm. Like, it does suck that this just gets destroyed by Ash, but I feel like that's just kind of something the deck has to deal with, is that like it's a high risk, high reward. If you resolve this, you're in a really good spot. But like if it gets Ashed, it does suck. But I've had this get Ashed and like still been okay. And like there's ways to bait it. Mainly, I also play through Pot of Desire. Spoiler. So like I don't know. I feel like the reward you get for Pendulum Call resolving greatly outweighs the risk of getting hit by Ash. Like there's a bunch of cards in the game where like if it gets hit by Ash, yeah, it sucks. But like that doesn't stop people from playing them. Like people played Grass even though if left arm got hit by Ash, you lost. But if it resolved, you won. So yeah, 3 Duelist Alliances, just because like you want to get these. So you're with 3 Duelist Alliances, you're essentially playing. You're playing 6 Pendulum Calls when you want to see it, but you're only playing 3 when you don't want to see it. You usually want to see it. You're playing 5 Star Pendulum Graphs. You're playing 5 Time Pendulum Graphs, and this searches whichever ones you're missing. It does suck in multiples, but I don't think that happens enough for it to be a problem. And honestly, if you do draw multiples, you can just search Pendulum Call and discard the second one. And it's really not hard to make this live. You just set a scale, and then you go. So, like, I've always been a fan of, like, 3 Duelist Alliance for sure. I don't know where the third one went. I was throwing things over the place. But yeah, the other spells are 2-Potted Desires, or no, 3-Potted Desires, because I swear by this card as a 3 or 0. Especially in Pendulum decks where you just need to get the card advantage. And this is like one of the cards that baits out Ash. So like generally what I do is that if I have this and I have Pendulum Call in my hand, first off, if there's anything in my hand that like I want to do first, like if I draw like a way to summon Dark Worm, or if I draw like a Chronograph Sorcerer, I'll do that first. But then I'll Desires, and this baits out Ash, because usually if you Desires and they have Ash in their hand, they're gonna Ash that, because otherwise you're plussing 1. And when that happens, you can Pendulum Call, and then so like the Desires baited out the Ash, and then you can Pendulum Call, and that does happen fairly frequently when you just open both of them, and it's very nice. So, but aside from that, just the +1 is really beneficial in Pendulum. I've considered playing Allure of Darkness in this also, honestly, just because so many cards in the deck are 3-ofs that like sometimes you can just give up one of them and just draw 2 cards, and that's just what you need to go off. But I don't know. I'm still like, that was one of the things I was considering, was cutting the Dragon Pit and bumping the 42 and playing 3 Allure of Darkness, but I think the Dragon Pit Magician is just a good meta call right now. And then the last cards are Dragon Shrine and Foolish Burial. That's just to send Dark Worm. One of each. You really don't want to see multiples of these. But yeah. And that's the entire main deck. Even with like without Astrograph, I really haven't had a problem making Electromite. Just like even without the Mythical Beasts, because you still have the Dragon Shrine, the Foolish Burial, you have the Chronograph Sorcerers, and then I was also playing Curtain Raiser, so that was like 6 ways to put a Pendulum on board. But even then, like without, like often I didn't see the Curtain Raiser anyway. But like even with those 5, you do frequently open hands where you just make Electromite. So I don't know. I haven't considered it a problem really. And then there's essentially 7 things that can ditch Dark Worm out of your hand, because you got the 3 Duelist Alliance, the 3 Pendulum Call, and the Dragon Pit Magician. And the Dragon Pit Magician is searchable by Oizumai, so there's like 9 ways to get it out of your hand if you draw it. So I don't really think like the Mythical Beasts are needed. And also with Electromite at 1, I don't think you have to summon it on the first turn. It's really good, but it's not like you have to do it. So yeah. And the deck can still make really good plays even without the pre-Pendulum Electromite. So I don't know why. People seem to have forgotten that this deck was good even before Electromite. Granted, it had Skullcrobat Joker and double Iris Magician, but it was still a really strong deck regardless. So yeah. So yeah, that's the main deck. Extra deck, I play 4 Link Monsters. I play Boral Sword. This card is, I feel like you need to play this in like every deck right now. So I had a friend of mine who also played Pendulum Magician. He played it at YCS New Jersey and barely missed top 32. When I dropped the Boral Sword on him and swung at him for a game, he got mad at me because like, you didn't even need to make Boral Sword. You could have just like Time Star Magician and then done something to pop your own Nada's Absolute Dragon and then gone off. I was like, yeah, but Boral Sword was a guarantee like 6,000. I don't know, I dropped this card like no less than 3 times on Sunday and it always won. And like sometimes I just like the ability to run over shit if I need to. Like if I accidentally like Waking the Dragon and there's like an ultimate Falcon on my opponent's side of the field, Boral Sword lets you run over it. So just like the utility of just running over anything and then also just killing your opponent, because if you have, I've done so many times, I've done the play where like I'll have like a Link 2, I'll have Absolute Dragon, and I'll have a 4th monster, and I'll link them all into Boral Sword and summon Vortex Dragon, and then if they have an attack position monster, I'll bounce it, and then I'll swing with Boral Sword, swing with Absolute, and then Boral Sword swing with Vortex, switch the Vortex to defense position, and then swing for game. Like, it's absurd. Like, if there's any Link, like, when I played at the regional back in March, Borreload actually came up a lot more than I thought it would, and Boral Sword's just a better Borreload, so definitely think Boral Sword is worth it. Metaltron, obviously, for the Electromite and Vortex play. The one Electromite, you only need 1. Like, 2 was definitely really nice, but this deck still plays fine with 1. Especially because, like, I find that the effect to recycle something from your Estrada back to your hand, losing that sucks. But the send from deck, I generally, after doing it the first time, you don't really need it the second time. So the second Link 2 I'm playing now is Wee Witch's Apprentice, just because everything in this deck is freaking dark. And if she dies, like if I don't link her away and she dies, then I get a Pendulum monster back, and also she boosts all my monsters by 500. I don't know, she's been really good. There was like one time where I wish I was playing a Lanfarancus just as a generic link too, but it doesn't come up enough where I feel like it's necessary. But yeah, it's the 4 link monsters. This is essentially the same as like the last time I seriously played Pendulum Magician. It's just the difference is that this was Borreload and this was the second Electromite. So, but more or less the same thing. For Xyz, 1 Absolute for the combo, and then everything else is a rank 4. You got Dweller, Dark Rebellion, Time Star. This card's great. Like, this is usually the one I go into on the first turn, unless I know my opponent's playing a graveyard-based deck, so I'll play Abyss Dweller. But just like being able to grab another Harmonizing or whatever you need to just ensure your plays are ready for next turn, and then this plus Time Pendulum Graph is really good. This is just good blanket protection. Like, I had this up and I had scales up. My opponent had a Twin Twister, and I didn't lose my scales, so that was pretty cool. Tornado Dragon, I haven't had this come up, but again, I was not playing against a lot of back row heavy decks. I feel like Tornado Dragon is just one of those rank 4s where like if you can make rank 4s, you need to play it just because a rank 4 MST is just really good. And Exciton Knight, I just love this card. I think a rank 4 Black Rose is really good. I did make this once online. It was the video I uploaded a few days ago called I Really Missed Evil Storm Exciton Knight. And there was a situation where when I was playing against the Goki player, he intentionally played around Exciton Knight because he was like, yeah, I don't want to get blown out by that card. So, like, yeah, Exciton Knight, like, I didn't make it at all, but I feel like this card is this is like Black Rose, where it's that card where if you can make it, you're not going to make it often, but when you do run into the opportunity where you can make it, you're going to be damn glad you had it. That's always the policy I've had on Exciton Knight, even like before it was banned. Like, I barely ever went into him, but when I did, it was great. And like, I don't think there's any other card that I think is more pressing. Like, I guess I could cut him for Norito, but I really don't make Norito that much either, so I don't know. Exciton's been good. And that's all the Xyz. And then Synchros are Ignister, Omega at 1, but we really only played 1 anyway. You used to play 2 before Electromite, but now 1 was fine. Clearwing, apparently people cut this because board wipes aren't that good. I don't know. I board wiped and swung for game and time, so that was pretty cool. And then I play 1 level 7, which is Meteor Burst, and this is just because this is just another way to go into Absolute and Vortex, because you can do Harmonizing and Time Gazer into this, summon a scale from your zone. It just extends extra deck plays, and also against Sky Striker, you can like make Absolute, swing with Absolute negated, bring back the Meteor Burst, swing with Meteor Burst, and they can't activate effects in the battle phase, so that's just a neat play also. I don't know, it came up a lot more than I thought it would, which is nice, and then the last card is Vortex, obviously, for the combo. Side deck is tentative, but this is what I was messing around with. 3 Dango Sekka. This just seems cute as fuck because, like I said, there's no real good normal summons in this deck anymore, so if you're going second against Sky Striker or just going in general against Altergeist, you just play this and then just go ham. I've theorized scenarios where my opponent sets like 4 back row and then I Dango Sekka and then like Exciton, and it seems like it would be amazing, so I'm waiting for that to happen. Yeah. Obviously didn't get to play it because I didn't play against any back row. So I play 3 Ash and 3 Ogre for... This is really mainly just for dealing with Goki. Like, I guess I would consider them against, like, I don't know, True Draco, but even then I'm not entirely sure if I would, because I think I'd rather just play back row hate. But yeah, it's mainly just for Goki or things where I feel like I need to stop them from OTKing me. I did also play Infinite Impermanence in the first of the 2 tournaments we did on Sunday. I ended up trying to play Shared Ride instead because this actually nets you advantage, and you can use this against Sky Striker as well. So, and Infinite Impermanence is a -1, which I don't think is good for this type of deck. So there's also that, and then 3 Twin Twister just for back row stuff, and Twin Twister is just like really good right now. I do kind of want to try putting in a Morphage Sloth in the side, because if you just do a Pendulum play and play a Morphage Sloth against, like, Goki, you kind of just win, apparently, from what my friend told me. So I might try that, but this side seems pretty solid. But yeah, that's the entire deck. I'm having more fun with this than any other deck in the format right now, so I'm probably going to still continue messing around with this. I think this deck is still incredibly viable. Like, this is definitely in the lump of decks where they're not really, like, top tier, but they're definitely still viable. So it's like this, Invoked, Burning Abyss. I would lump Spiral in there, as just Spiral's really fragile is the biggest problem with it. But yeah, this is definitely a really good deck still, and it's something to watch out for. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.